In the year 2028, something strange happened in the middle of the Atacama Desert in Chile. It was a bright morning, the sky clear and endless, when a group of scientists at one of the world's biggest radio telescopes noticed a strange sound coming from deep space. At first it was soft and weak, like a heartbeat coming from millions of miles away. The computers recorded it as a repeating pattern, a signal that seemed too perfect to be made by nature. One of the scientists, Dr. Elena Vargas, thought it was just interference. Maybe it was a satellite or some technical fault. But when she looked closer, the pattern repeated every exactly 37 seconds, never changing, never fading. It was too precise. It was too intentional. Within hours, other observatories in different parts of the world began reporting the same thing. Japan, South Africa, the United States, each one picked up the same repeating pulse from the same area of the sky. Scientists tried to block it, test it, and explain it, but no matter what they did, the signal continued. It was like someone was knocking softly on the door of the universe, waiting for someone to answer. The news spread fast. Social media exploded with posts claiming aliens were trying to contact Earth. Governments told people to stay calm, calling it a scientific anomaly, but no one really believed that. The idea that something or someone out there might be trying to talk to humanity was too exciting to ignore. In the following weeks, the world changed. Every major space agency turned its attention to that one point in the sky. The signal came from far beyond the solar system, near a small dim star that had no known planets around it. It was so far away that even light took years to reach us from there. But the most amazing part wasn't the distance, it was the message hidden in the sound. The pattern wasn't random noise. It had structure, order, and rhythm. When mapped on a graph, it formed repeating shapes, numbers, sequences, and ratios that matched universal mathematical laws. One of the scientists said it was like hearing music made out of numbers, perfectly in tune with the logic of the universe. Everyone agreed that nature didn't make music like that. Intelligence did. Dr. Vargas became one of the leading voices studying the signal. She spent long nights in the observatory, listening to the endless repeating pattern. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine someone far away, sitting under a different sky waiting for an answer. There was a strange sadness in the sound, something that made her feel it wasn't a call of pride or curiosity, but a call for help. Many scientists disagreed, saying it was too soon to jump to emotional conclusions, but deep down many of them felt the same. There was something desperate about the rhythm, like someone knocking harder and harder as the door stayed closed. Then came the turning point. One night, after months of recording, the signal suddenly changed. The rhythm slowed, then grew faster, as if reacting to something. This was impossible. A natural source could not change like that. It was as if whoever was sending it had noticed that Earth was finally paying attention. The new sequence repeated for only 2 hours and then returned to its old pattern. But those 2 hours changed everything. Inside that new signal was a hidden structure, a code that could be translated into numbers and images. It took months to decode it, but the more scientists worked on it, the more they realized it wasn't random at all. It was communication. The world watched as supercomputers worked day and night to translate the message. Television channels around the globe covered it like a sporting event. People placed bets on what the first alien words would be. Some said it would be a greeting, others said it would be a warning, but no one expected what they finally discovered. The decoded message wasn't a greeting or a threat. It was a cry for help. The words were simple and haunting. We are dying. Our sun is collapsing. We seek assistance. When the translation was confirmed, there was silence across every newsroom and research center. For the first time in history, humans had proof that intelligent life existed beyond Earth, and they were in trouble. The coordinates included in the message pointed to a star system, just on the edge of what humanity could reach with current technology. It was a small system with one fading star, barely glowing, surrounded by traces of what might have been planets. Telescopes turned toward it, but all they could see was dust and dim light. If the senders were still alive, they were hanging on by a thread. At first, people were filled with hope. The idea that humans could help another species was thrilling. It made people feel united. News headlines read, "Humanity receives first cosmic call for help and Earth's moment of destiny." Social media overflowed with messages of compassion and wonder. Artists painted the signal waves. Musicians composed songs based on the rhythm. For a brief moment, it felt like the whole world was one big family. connected not just by Earth but by the vastness of the universe. But not everyone was filled with wonder. Some governments, especially those with advanced space programs, were cautious. They held secret meetings asking hard questions. Was it really a plea for help or a trap? Could it be a trick to make humans reveal their location? Could it be a test to see how Earth would respond? Scientists argued endlessly, splitting into two camps, one that believed in helping and another that believed in defending. The debate wasn't just scientific, it was moral. If someone was crying for help, did humans have the right to ignore it? Meanwhile, Dr. Vargas and her team continued to study every detail of the signal. They discovered faint patterns hidden behind the main message, like background whispers. These secondary patterns contained maps, or at least what looked like maps of a solar system that no human had ever seen. One of them even looked like a diagram of technology, perhaps energy systems, structures, or machines. Nobody knew what they truly meant. But what was certain was that whoever had sent the message was incredibly advanced. Their understanding of energy, communication, and mathematics was far beyond Earth's. Months turned into years. The signal never stopped. It pulsed through the night skies, steady and patient, as if waiting for a reply. Many people began to feel haunted by it. Poets wrote about the loneliness of space. Children asked their parents if aliens were sad. Philosophers asked whether humans would ever send such a message if Earth were dying. The world became obsessed not only with the idea of alien life, but with what it meant to be human. Then something even stranger happened. In several countries, people began reporting dreams of light, visions of stars and collapsing suns. Some believed it was their imagination, but others claimed the dreams were connected to the signal. Scientists dismissed these stories as psychological reactions, but the sense of mystery only deepened. Humanity had never felt so close to something greater, and yet so small at the same time. The signal had become a mirror. It showed people not just what might exist out there, but what they were here on Earth. Divided, curious, compassionate, and afraid. Governments began preparing plans for how to respond. Should they send a message back? Should they reveal everything to the public? Some leaders wanted to keep it secret, fearing panic or loss of control. Others argued that such a discovery belonged to everyone, not just the powerful. For the first time, nations that had been rivals found themselves talking, sharing data, and cooperating. Even countries that barely agreed on anything before now sat at the same table, discussing the fate of another world. Dr. Vargas often stood outside the observatory at night, staring up at the stars. She wondered what the faces of the senders looked like, what kind of world they lived in, what kind of pain they must have felt as their son began to die. She felt a deep sadness, but also a sense of awe. The universe, so big and cold, suddenly felt personal. Someone out there had called for help, and Earth had heard them. It was as if the galaxy itself had reached across the void, asking, "Will you answer?" By the end of that year, humanity stood on the edge of something greater than it had ever known. The signal still played every night, a soft, rhythmic heartbeat from across the stars. It didn't bring fear anymore, it brought a question, one that echoed through every city, every mind, and every heart on Earth. If we are truly not alone, what kind of neighbors will we be? The answer was still unknown, but one thing was certain. The moment the signal was heard, the world would never be the same again. The months that followed the discovery of the alien signal were some of the most exciting and confusing in human history. The message that had reached Earth from deep space was still repeating, steady and patient, like a voice calling again and again, waiting for someone to answer. The best minds in the world gathered to study it. Scientists, mathematicians, linguists, and computer experts from every country. No single nation claimed ownership anymore. The mystery was too big, too important. Everyone wanted to know what it said and who had sent it. The first step was decoding the signal. At first, the sound seemed like simple pulses, short and long beats that repeated over and over. But once the data was mapped, it revealed patterns that could be turned into numbers. The numbers were not random. They were based on prime numbers and mathematical sequences that only intelligent beings could create. That was the first clear proof that it was a message, not just cosmic noise. Huge supercomputers were used to analyze every small part of it. Thousands of scientists stayed awake for days, running programs, comparing codes, and building translation models. They treated the signal as a language, though no one knew what kind of language it really was. Some thought it was based on math. Others believed it was visual or even musical. Dr. Elena Vargas and her team worked day and night, drinking coffee, staring at screens full of strange numbers and symbols. Every time they thought they had found meaning, the pattern changed and made them start again. Finally, after many weeks, something incredible happened. A small group of cryptographers in Switzerland noticed that the signal repeated in sections, like chapters in a book. Each section had its own internal rhythm, and when they converted the sound waves into images, they found shapes forming on their screens. Circles, triangles, and spirals appeared again and again, organized in symmetrical patterns. These weren't random. They looked like maps or perhaps diagrams. One of the images even resembled the structure of a solar system, a star in the center with several orbiting points. That was when they realized the signal wasn't just math. It was communication through both numbers and images. The discovery made global headlines. News channels broadcast the images around the world, calling them the first alien words. People stared at their screens in disbelief. The images looked both simple and ancient, like cave drawings made by a civilization far more advanced than humanity. But the true shock came when scientists decoded the section that contained text-like symbols. Those symbols translated into a short, heartbreaking message. It said, "We are dying. Our sun is collapsing. We seek assistance." The words were universal and clear. An intelligent race somewhere far away was asking for help. The announcement changed the world overnight. People gathered in the streets staring at the night sky, wondering who these beings were. Were they like humans? Did they have families, dreams, fears? Did they have children watching their dying sky, hoping for a miracle? For the first time in history, the human race felt united by something bigger than itself. It was no longer just about countries or borders. It was about life, any life, trying to survive in the cold, empty universe. In classrooms, teachers told students about the discovery. Children drew pictures of aliens holding hands with humans. Poets wrote about compassion between stars. Religious leaders from every faith spoke about the meaning of creation and life beyond Earth. Even people who had never cared about space before now followed every update on the news. Humanity had never felt so connected, so curious, and so hopeful. But not everyone felt hope. Some were afraid. In secret government rooms, leaders and generals held quiet meetings far from cameras. They discussed the possibility that the message was not a plea for help, but a trap. What if the senders were not dying but searching for new worlds to invade? What if the message was a test, to see if humans were weak or kind and to use that kindness against them later? Fear began to grow quietly behind the scenes. The same message that had united people also began to divide them. Still, the scientists continued their work. They had not yet finished decoding everything. Along with the words, the signal carried long strings of data that looked like coordinates, points in space that described where the message came from. When those coordinates were plotted on a galactic map, they pointed to a star system over 140 light-years away, near the edge of what humans could even observe. The star there was small, weak and fading, just as the message had described. Telescopes all over the world turned toward that spot in the sky. The light from that system was faint, but it was there, a dying star surrounded by a cloud of dust and broken fragments. It looked like a graveyard of planets. The scientists realized that whoever had sent the message might already be gone. The thought sent chills through everyone. Humanity may have received a call for help hundreds of years too late. Still, there was hope. Some scientists suggested that maybe some of the beings had survived underground, or fled to nearby planets. Others said the message might have been an automatic distress signal, a recording that had kept broadcasting long after the civilization had died. Either way, it proved one thing beyond doubt. Humans were not alone in the universe. The loneliness of Earth had finally been broken. The United Nations formed a special committee called Project Solace to manage the situation. It included top scientists, engineers, and diplomats from around the world. Their goal was simple but heavy with meaning: to decide how humanity should respond. The project's motto became, "To listen is to belong." But behind closed doors, things were not so peaceful. Many countries saw Project Solace as a chance for power. If humans could contact aliens, they could also learn from them. Imagine the technology, the energy systems, the knowledge of the stars. Some nations secretly hoped that by being the first to answer, they could gain control over that knowledge and become unstoppable. While scientists dreamed of peace, politicians dreamed of advantage. Meetings grew tense. Some countries wanted to send a friendly message back. offering compassion and aid. Others said it was too dangerous and that Earth should stay silent. The argument became so strong that at one point, the United Nations nearly collapsed under the pressure. But the people of Earth wanted answers. They wanted to respond. Millions of citizens signed online petitions demanding that Earth send a reply to the aliens. It became clear that humanity couldn't ignore the message forever. Dr. Elena Vargas continued to play a key role. Her team found more layers hidden inside the signal, additional data encoded in the rhythm and frequency changes. They discovered that the aliens had used something like a language bridge combining logic, sound, and light patterns that any intelligent species could potentially understand. It was brilliant and simple at the same time, showing just how advanced they were, but the emotional weight of their words still lingered. Every time the message repeated, it felt more urgent, more desperate. We are dying. Our sun is collapsing. We seek assistance. It was a voice from a ghost civilization crying across time. As months turned into years, Earth began to prepare. Space agencies started designing missions that could someday reach the star system. It was almost impossible. The distance was too great, the time too long, but the dream had begun. Engineers talked about new engines faster than any before. Biologists wondered what kind of life could survive under a collapsing sun. Philosophers asked what it meant to be a good neighbor in the universe. The entire planet seemed to have entered a new age of discovery. At the same time, fear began to rise again. Some people claimed the aliens could already be watching Earth. Others believed the signal itself might be dangerous, like a hidden virus meant to harm computers or systems. Conspiracy theories spread quickly. A few groups even protested outside observatories, demanding scientists stop listening to the signal. But the scientists refused. They said that ignoring a call for help would be like turning away from a drowning voice in the ocean. As the world argued, the signal kept coming. It never grew weaker or stronger. It just stayed constant, unbroken, as if waiting for an answer that never came. It was both haunting and beautiful. Some called it the universe's saddest song. Radio stations even played recordings of it on air, mixed with soft music. People said it made them cry. It reminded them of how small Earth was compared to the endless stars. Eventually, after long debates and planning, Project Solace made a decision. Humanity would respond, but carefully. A simple message would be sent back, not with promises of power or weapons, but with compassion. The reply was written by a group of scientists and poets working together. It said, "We hear you. You are not alone. We are listening." When it was finally transmitted toward the same coordinates, billions of people watched from their homes. The transmission was invisible, just a wave of light traveling into the dark. But people imagined it like a spark leaping across the universe, carrying humanity's first true words to another world. After that, the waiting began again. No one knew if the aliens would or could respond, but something inside people had changed. The discovery of the message and the act of replying had touched something deep in the human heart. People began to look at the stars differently. They didn't just see burning lights anymore. They saw stories, possibilities, and lives. The universe no longer felt cold and empty. It felt alive. The message from the dying star had changed the world, but the more time passed, the more people began to argue about what it truly meant. Some believed it was a sacred call, a chance for humans to prove that compassion was stronger than fear. Others saw it as a dangerous distraction, something that could lead to disaster. The unity that had once filled the planet slowly began to break apart. Governments started acting in secret, and what began as a moment of hope slowly turned into a struggle for control. Humanity had reached a point where every choice mattered, and every nation wanted to be the one to make it. The United Nations Project Solace had been created to lead humanity's response to the alien message. It was meant to be a symbol of unity, with scientists and leaders from all over the world working together. But behind the smiling faces in public meetings, there were whispers of mistrust. Countries with strong space programs like the United States, China, and Russia began to withhold certain data, keeping small details about their discoveries to themselves. Each one wanted to be the first to decode new parts of the alien signal. Each one wanted to control what would happen next. The race to help had quietly become a race for power. Inside the secret meeting rooms of Project Solace, the mood had changed. In the early days, the meetings were filled with excitement and wonder. Scientists shared discoveries openly, dreaming of building something together. Now they looked over their shoulders, careful about what they said. Military officers began attending the sessions, often interrupting the scientists to ask questions about defense possibilities. Could the aliens' technology be copied? Could the information in the signal be used to build new weapons or power systems? The project's focus slowly began to shift from communication to control. Dr. Elena Vargas watched this change with growing sadness. She had joined the project because she believed it was about empathy, not dominance. For her, the message wasn't a threat. It was a cry for help, a chance for humanity to prove that it was capable of kindness beyond its own planet. But now she saw how ambition and fear were taking over. The same message that once united people was now dividing them. Every time she spoke about compassion, the generals rolled their eyes. One even told her, "Kindness won't protect us if they come for us." Meanwhile, ordinary people around the world continued to dream about contact. They organized global listening events where communities gathered under open skies, playing recordings of the alien signal like a cosmic prayer. Artists painted murals of distant galaxies. Children wrote letters addressed to the lost ones, and musicians turned the rhythm of the message into songs. Yet even as people celebrated the mystery, they could feel the tension in the air. Something had changed. Governments began restricting information, and journalists who asked too many questions were told to stop digging. It was clear that whatever was happening behind closed doors, it was no longer just about science. A year after the decoding, several nations began constructing their own deep space research facilities. The official story was that they were building better equipment to improve communication, but in truth they were developing powerful propulsion technologies. The alien message had included fragments that seemed to describe how energy could be harnessed in ways far beyond human understanding. It was like holding the key to infinite power, clean, limitless, and efficient. But instead of sharing the discovery, each country tried to decode it in secret. The race for space had turned into a race for supremacy. Inside Project Solace, disagreements grew worse. Some scientists resigned, unwilling to see their work turned into military tools. Others stayed, afraid of what might happen if they didn't. Dr. Vargas became one of the few voices still arguing for honesty and compassion. In one meeting, she stood before the council and said, "They asked for help, not war. If we turn this into a weapon, we are no better than the dying sun they fled from." Her words echoed through the hall, but few responded. The project director, a calm and powerful man named General Nicholas Rains, simply said, "Sometimes, Dr. Vargas, survival requires strength." After that, she stopped speaking up as much, though the sadness in her eyes grew deeper. As years passed, technology advanced faster than anyone could have imagined. The signal had inspired a new age of invention. Artificial intelligence improved, energy systems evolved, and spaceflight became more efficient. But the more humanity advanced, the more it drifted away from the message's original purpose. Scientists began to study the data not to help the dying civilization, but to see how they could use it for themselves. What had started as a call for help was now a competition for who could use alien knowledge to control the future. Ordinary people didn't know the full truth. News channels only shared positive stories about progress, peace, and exploration. Behind the scenes, powerful nations were testing new technologies that could change the balance of power on Earth. Some of the discoveries were too dangerous to share. One experiment in Siberia tried to replicate the aliens' energy system, but ended in disaster, creating a blast that destroyed an entire research center. The government called it an industrial accident, but those who knew the truth called it a warning. Despite the growing fear, some scientists continued to believe in the purity of the mission. They still wanted to send a true rescue mission, a ship that could travel to the distant star system and find out what had happened to the aliens. But such a mission required cooperation between nations, and cooperation was fading fast. Each country wanted to build its own ship, and none wanted to share the technology. The world had fallen back into its old patterns of mistrust, even while looking up at the stars. Dr. Vargas found herself torn between hope and disappointment. She spent long nights in her office listening to the signal, still pulsing softly through the background of the universe. She often wondered if the aliens, wherever they were, could somehow sense what was happening on Earth. Could they feel the greed growing here? Could they see that instead of compassion, humans were now fighting over the remains of their message? She began writing a personal diary, where she poured out her fears. "We were given a mirror," she wrote, "and instead of seeing their suffering, we only saw our own hunger." Then one night, a new discovery changed everything again. A research team in India detected a faint alteration in the signal's rhythm. It wasn't a new message, just a small change, like a heartbeat slowing down. The scientists realized that the strength of the signal was fading. It was as if the transmission was finally dying out, running out of energy after traveling across the stars for so long. Humanity was running out of time to respond. If they waited much longer, the voice of the dying civilization would be lost forever. The fading signal created panic inside Project Solace. Now everyone wanted to act, but instead of working together, nations began rushing to finish their own secret projects. Within months, 3 separate space missions were announced, each claiming to be a peaceful exploration effort. The truth was much darker. Each mission was designed not only to reach the source of the signal, but also to secure any alien technology that might exist there. Humanity was preparing not to help, but to claim. The world outside didn't know this, of course. To the public, it looked like a golden age of discovery. Space programs received more funding than ever before. News reporters called it the dawn of the second space race. People cheered as rockets launched into the sky. But a few, like Dr. Vargas, knew that this new race wasn't about the stars. It was about power. She had meetings with journalists trying to warn them, but no one dared to publish her words. The world didn't want the truth. It wanted hope, even if it was false. By 2035, the tension had reached its peak. The fading signal had become a haunting background noise in human life, still there but weaker every day. The once beautiful sound now felt like a dying heartbeat. People still played it on radios and in schools, but most no longer felt its meaning. It had become just another sound in the world's noise. Humanity had moved on from wonder to ambition. Dr. Vargas tried one last time to remind everyone why the message had mattered. She organized an international broadcast, showing the original decoded message again. She said, "They didn't send us power. They sent us their last breath. We must not answer it with greed." Her speech was emotional and sincere, but only a few listened. Most people were too busy preparing for the missions that would soon leave Earth. By the end of that year, humanity stood divided once more, just as it always had been. The nations had the knowledge, the power, and the technology to reach the stars, but they had lost something far greater, their humility. The aliens had once called out in desperation, hoping for compassion. Instead, they had awakened the oldest hunger inside the human heart, the hunger for control. And as the final echoes of the alien signal faded into silence, no one noticed the irony. The universe had given humanity a chance to rise above itself, but instead, it had only revealed who humans truly were. By the year 2036, the world was no longer the same. What had begun as a message of hope from the stars had turned into a silent battle for dominance. Nations that once promised cooperation were now locked in secret competition, racing to be the first to reach the dying star system that had sent the message years ago. The dream of helping an alien civilization had slowly faded. Now humanity's true goal was something else, to uncover whatever knowledge or technology the aliens had left behind. The excuse was still to help, but the real mission was about power. After years of work, Project Solace finally completed the most advanced spacecraft ever built. It was named Astreus after the ancient god of stars. It was unlike anything humans had ever created. Powered by quantum fusion engines, it could travel faster and farther than any ship before. Its hull was made of a new metal alloy that could withstand radiation and cosmic storms. Inside, it carried laboratories, communication rooms, and even small living quarters for the crew, who would spend years in space. The launch of Astreus was called the greatest achievement in human history. Billions of people watched the live broadcast as the ship stood tall on the launch pad, glowing under the rising sun. They believed they were witnessing the beginning of a new age, a moment when humans would finally reach beyond their limits and become saviors of another. World Dr. Elena Vargas watched the launch with mixed feelings. She was proud of what humanity had built, but deep inside she knew the truth. She had seen the classified files, the hidden orders, the private conversations between generals and politicians. Astreus was not being sent to offer help. It was being sent to claim ownership of whatever the aliens had left behind. There were orders to retrieve any materials, data, or artifacts that could provide an advantage. The people believed in compassion, but those in power believed in control. The crew of Astraeus was a mix of scientists, engineers, and soldiers. Officially, they were explorers. In reality, many were trained to secure and protect potential discoveries. The ship launched from a massive base in the Pacific Ocean, rising into the sky with a roar that shook the earth. As it disappeared into the clouds, people cheered and cried, waving flags and holding signs that said, "For humanity and for the lost ones." The sound of hope echoed around the world, even though the mission's heart carried something much darker. It took months for Astraeus to leave Earth's solar system. During that time, the crew recorded video messages sending updates back home. The world followed their journey like a global drama. Every broadcast was filled with smiles and inspiring words about unity and discovery. "We are one people under one sky," said Captain Marcus Lee, the commander of the mission. His calm and confident voice became famous, a symbol of human courage. But behind the recorded videos, tension grew. The scientists wanted to focus on research, but the military officers on board had different priorities. They spoke in coded language, mentioning recovery objectives and containment zones. Some of the crew started to question what they were truly there for. After 2 years of travel, Astraeus reached the outer limits of the target system. The dying star shone dimly like an ember in the dark. It was a haunting sight, beautiful but sad. Around it drifted the remains of broken planets and moons, shattered into dust and rock. The crew watched in silence, realizing that they were looking at the grave of a once-living world. As they moved closer, the ship's sensors began picking up unusual readings, structures hidden among the debris, metallic and symmetrical. These weren't natural formations. They were the remains of cities, stations, or ships. The aliens had truly existed here. When Astraeus entered orbit around what used to be the main planet, the crew saw something that none of them could have imagined. Scattered across the planet's surface were giant rings of crystal and metal, glowing faintly even after centuries. They were massive structures stretching for miles, their designs far beyond human understanding. The scientists were speechless. It was proof, undeniable proof, that the message had come from a once great civilization. But as they examined the readings, they noticed something else. There were no signs of life. No energy, no communication, no movement. Whoever had sent the message was long gone. The crew decided to land. The atmosphere was thin and toxic, but with protective suits they could walk on the surface. When they stepped out of the ship, the silence was overwhelming. The ground was covered in dark dust, and the only sound was the faint hum of their breathing systems. All around them stood the remains of towers and machines, half buried under centuries of decay. Dr. Vargas, who was part of the science team, felt a strange sadness. She whispered, "We are too late." Captain Lee nodded but didn't respond. His orders were clear: search, record, and recover. Over the next several weeks, the crew explored the ruins. They found fragments of writing carved into the walls of metallic halls, strange glowing stones that still held traces of power, and enormous machines that no one could understand. Some of the soldiers became nervous, saying the place felt cursed. One of them described it as a cemetery built by gods. Still, the mission continued. The deeper they went, the more they found. Evidence of incredible technology that could change human civilization forever. A few of the scientists wanted to preserve everything untouched, but the command center back on Earth had other plans. They ordered Captain Lee to bring samples and data back no matter what. The mission was no longer about respect or discovery. It was about possession. Dr. Vargas tried to protest. She sent messages back to Earth, warning that the operation was dishonoring the memory of the beings who had asked for help. But her messages were intercepted. She was told to stay silent. She realized then that humanity had not come to this world as rescuers. They had come as scavengers. They had arrived not to give, but to take. The truth broke her heart. Then, one day, the team discovered something that changed everything. In the heart of a massive underground structure, they found a chamber still powered by weak energy. Inside was a glowing sphere, floating above a metallic platform. The readings showed it contained vast amounts of data, possibly the collective knowledge of the entire alien civilization. When they approached it, the sphere reacted, glowing brighter. Symbols appeared around it, forming a pattern similar to the original signal Earth had received. It was as if the sphere recognized them. Some of the scientists believed it was trying to communicate, but the command from Earth was simple: take it. Captain Lee hesitated. He could feel the weight of what they had found. If we remove it, he said, we might destroy whatever memory of them still exists. The voice from Earth replied coldly, bring it home. Humanity deserves it. Against his own judgment, Lee followed orders. The team prepared to transport the sphere back to Astraeus. The moment they touched it, the ground trembled. Lights flickered across the ruins and a deep sound echoed through the air, like a voice awakening after centuries of silence. The crew ran back to the ship, carrying the sphere with them, unaware of what they had awakened. As Astraeus left the planet's orbit, the sensors detected energy waves rippling from the surface. The dead world had begun to glow as if the ruins themselves were alive. Dr. Vargas watched from the observation deck, tears in her eyes. They're not gone, she whispered. We just disturbed their sleep. But there was no turning back. The ship continued its journey home, carrying the alien relic inside its cargo bay. A relic that pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. When the first transmission reached Earth, everyone celebrated. The mission was declared a success. Humanity had reached another star system and brought back proof of alien life. The governments called it the greatest achievement of all time. News channels replayed the footage of the glowing ruins again and again. But what the public didn't know was that the mission had failed its true purpose. The aliens had asked for help, but humans had arrived too late. Instead of compassion, they had shown greed. The message had been a warning, and humanity had not listened. In the weeks that followed, strange things began happening aboard Astraeus. Systems started malfunctioning. Crew members reported hearing faint voices inside the ship. Some swore they saw flashes of light moving through the corridors, like reflections that weren't supposed to be there. Dr. Vargas began to suspect that the sphere wasn't just a machine. Maybe it was alive, or maybe it carried the last consciousness of the alien species. Whatever it was, humanity had taken something that wasn't meant to be taken. Back on Earth, the leaders didn't care. They were already planning how to use the technology once Astraeus returned. Energy companies wanted to study it, militaries wanted to weaponize it, and politicians wanted to control it. The world that had once dreamed of helping the helpless was now preparing to exploit the dead. The true tragedy wasn't what had happened to the aliens, it was what humanity had become. As Astraeus drifted farther from the dying sun, Dr. Vargas recorded her final log entry. We came here chasing hope, she said quietly, but found only the reflection of our own hunger. They reached out for help, and we reached out for power. Maybe that's why the universe is so silent, because civilizations destroy themselves not with war, but with their own pride. Her words were never broadcast. They were erased before the transmission reached Earth. The dying planet behind them faded into darkness, its faint glow slowly disappearing. The signal that had started everything went silent at last. There would be no more calls, no more cries for help. The voice of the lost civilization had finally vanished, leaving humanity alone once again, alone with its power, its technology, and its guilt. When the Astraeus began its long journey back to Earth, the entire world celebrated. Every country claimed a part of the victory. Newspapers called it the greatest moment in human history. Politicians smiled on television, scientists gave hopeful speeches, and people filled the streets to watch the glowing image of the dying star system that had finally given up its secrets. Humanity had done it. They had reached another civilization, one that had once existed far across the universe. But behind all the noise and celebration, there was something darker, something no one wanted to admit. Humanity had not gone to help. It had gone to take, and though the world called it a triumph, those who knew the truth felt only shame. On board Astraeus, the atmosphere was heavy. The crew had completed their mission, but no one felt like a hero. They had found no living beings, no survivors to rescue. What they had found instead was a tomb, a world of silence and dust. Dr. Elena Vargas spent hours in the observation room, staring out into the endless black space. The stars looked cold and distant, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw the ruins of that dead civilization. She could still hear the soft hum of the alien sphere they had taken, pulsing like a slow heartbeat from the cargo bay. The sphere was supposed to be a great discovery, but to her it felt like a reminder of failure. Captain Marcus Lee sat quietly in his cabin, replaying the mission recordings. In his last private log, he spoke in a low, tired voice. "We were too late. We came here to save them, but there was no one left to save. And still, we took what was theirs. Maybe that's what humans do best. Take, not give." He stopped the recording and looked at the small screen showing Earth's distant position. It was still months away, but he already knew what would happen when they arrived. The governments would take control of everything. The sphere would be locked away in secret laboratories, and the truth about the aliens' message would be rewritten. History would remember the mission as a story of courage and unity. No one would ever mention greed. On Earth, the people were eager. Every news channel talked about the return of Astreus. Children learned about the mission in schools. Songs were written about the brave crew who answered the call from the stars. Statues were planned, documentaries were filmed, and the world prepared to welcome its heroes. But when the ship finally sent its first real-time transmission before entering the solar system, the words that reached Earth were not what anyone expected. It was Captain Lee's voice, calm, but full of sorrow. "They reached out for help," he said, "and we reached out for power. May history judge who truly survived." Then the screen went dark. For several minutes the world was silent. No one knew if it was a malfunction or something deliberate. The government immediately took control of communications, ordering media stations not to air the full message. Only a few seconds of it were shown to the public, edited to make it sound like a poetic farewell. The rest was buried, labeled as classified. Inside the ship, things were getting worse. The sphere had started behaving strangely. It emitted low-frequency sounds that caused the ship's instruments to glitch. Lights flickered and electronic systems began to fail. Crew members complained of hearing whispers or seeing flashes of light in the corridors. Some described them as ghostly figures moving in the shadows. Dr. Vargas believed the sphere was reacting to them, perhaps even trying to communicate. She begged the captain to stop the engines and study it before returning to Earth, but it was too late. They were already within range of home. Then one night something happened that no one could explain. The sphere suddenly released a burst of light that filled the entire ship. For a few seconds, every system shut down. When power returned, the sphere was silent again. But the ship's computers showed strange symbols across every monitor, the same symbols that had appeared in the original alien message years ago. The scientists didn't know if it was a warning or a goodbye. Dr. Vargas thought it was the latter. "They know we're leaving," she whispered, "and they're letting us go." When Astreus finally landed back on Earth, it was greeted with cheers and fireworks. The crew stepped out to flashing lights and waving crowds. The world celebrated them as heroes who had reached the stars and brought home knowledge. But the faces of the crew told a different story. Their smiles were small and tired, their eyes heavy with the weight of what they had seen. Dr. Vargas didn't even look at the cameras. She walked quietly, holding a small notebook close to her chest. She knew the truth, and she knew it would soon be hidden forever. The alien sphere was immediately taken to a secret facility under military control. Scientists were ordered to study it, but only under strict supervision. Rumors spread that the sphere could generate unlimited energy or even open communication with other worlds. People began calling it the heart of the universe. It became a symbol of pride, a trophy of human achievement. But to those who had been on the mission, it was a gravestone, a reminder of the civilization they had failed to save. In the following months, humanity's attitude changed again. People stopped talking about compassion or unity. Instead, they began to dream about expansion. If one dying world could send a signal, then maybe others existed too. Other civilizations, other technologies to discover and use. Governments announced new missions to explore deep space. Private companies started building their own spacecraft. Humanity had tasted the stars, and now it wanted more. What began as curiosity had become hunger. Dr. Vargas couldn't accept it. She tried to speak publicly, warning that humanity was repeating the same mistakes that might have destroyed the aliens, but her words were ignored, and soon she was silenced. The world didn't want guilt. It wanted glory. Her speeches were removed from the internet. Her interviews never aired. Eventually, she disappeared from the public eye altogether. Some said she retired. Others said she was forced to stop speaking. No one really knew. Years passed. The story of the aliens became legend. In history books, the mission was remembered as the day humanity answered the call of the universe. Children learned that humans had brought hope to the stars. The truth that they had arrived too late and taken what wasn't theirs was erased. But some people still wondered. Astronomers occasionally picked up faint echoes from the same part of the sky. They weren't strong enough to decode, but they sounded like whispers, soft, broken, and distant. People called them the echoes of the lost. Meanwhile, strange events began to happen on Earth. Power systems behaved unpredictably, and some scientists noticed patterns in the fluctuations that matched the rhythm of the alien signal. It was as if the sphere's presence had changed something, as if it had connected Earth to something far beyond. A few researchers secretly suggested that the sphere might be transmitting again, not outward but inward, sending messages not through machines, but through people's minds. Reports appeared of people dreaming about collapsing stars and unfamiliar landscapes. Governments denied everything, calling it collective imagination, but deep down, many knew that the connection between Earth and the dead civilization had never truly ended. Dr. Vargas lived quietly in isolation, far from cities in a small cabin near the mountains. She had spent years studying her private notes, trying to understand what the aliens had really meant. One night, she received a small data packet from an anonymous source. It contained a decrypted fragment of the sphere's final transmission before it was locked away. It was a short sequence of symbols and numbers that translated into words. She read it slowly, her hands trembling. It said, "Do not repeat us." Tears rolled down her face. The message was clear. The aliens had not just asked for help. They had tried to warn humanity. Their son had died, but not because of natural causes. It had died because of them. Their greed, their pride, their use of power beyond control. They had destroyed their own world. And in their final moments, they had sent a warning into space, hoping someone would listen and learn. Humanity had heard it but misunderstood it. Instead of learning, they had followed the same path. Dr. Vargas closed her notebook and whispered, "We are becoming them." Years later, after her death, her private diary was discovered. In it, she had written her final thoughts. "The universe is full of voices, but most of them are not asking for help. They are crying out in regret. We call them stars, but maybe they are tombs, each one holding the memory of a civilization that once reached too far. And now we are building our own tomb, one invention at a time." By then, Astreus was long gone, decommissioned and forgotten, and the sphere had vanished from the facility where it was kept. Some said it had been moved. Others whispered that it had dissolved on its own, leaving behind only a faint mark on the floor shaped like a circle of light. No one knew what happened to it, but some believed it had returned to where it belonged, back to the silence of the stars. As the decades passed, humanity continued to grow more powerful. New engines, new colonies, new discoveries, yet the night sky remained the same, vast, dark, and quiet. The signal from the dying world never came again. The only sound left was the echo of Dr. Vargas's last recorded words, preserved secretly by one of her friends. They reached out for help. We reached out for power, and in the end we both reached the same thing, emptiness. And so the story of the first contact became a myth, a beautiful lie told to children about how humanity helped another world. The truth was buried, but the universe never forgets. Somewhere in the endless dark, beyond the reach of any telescope, the remnants of that ruined civilization still floated in silence. And perhaps if someone listened closely enough, they could still hear the faint heartbeat of a message that once crossed the stars. Not a cry for help, but a warning to every world that ever dared to call itself powerful.